Hello and welcome to another Top of Mind webinar, the webinar series where we get real security leaders talking about what's top of mind for them. I hope the conversation is useful to you today. My name is Samuel Hill. I lead product marketing here at Mind, and I'm joined today by Landon Brown, our field CTO here at Mind. Landon, we have a very special webinar topic today. We're going over the results of this research report that we've put together, looking at the role data trust plays in AI success. How fun is this topic?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I think we have some awesome thought leaders as well. We have Tim with SS&C and Bill, who you'll introduce here in just a moment, Samuel. But I think what's most important is some of the collaboration that went into this research report, and some of the findings that come out of it are extremely tangible and relevant, which, you know, for me, Samuel, tangibility is the most important metric that we can produce as a company for our customers. And so it was good to see a lot of that come out of this report.
Yeah, so let's introduce our guests today. First, we'll introduce Tim Kropp. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at SS&C and also a research report participant. Tim, it's good to have you on the Top of Mind webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Samuel. It's good to see you again. It was fun doing the research.
It was, yeah, indeed. And also with us today is Bill Sieglin. He's one of the founders and the Chief Operating Officer at the CISO Executive Network. Bill, welcome to the Top of Mind webinar.
Hey, it's great to be on today. It's a great topic, and we were excited to participate in this.
Yeah, so let's set the table for everyone here real quick. So we're looking at the intersection of data security, data trust, the ability to use data well with a company's ability to go fast with AI. I don't think any of us need to educate our listeners on how fast AI is moving across the organization. That would be a waste of our breath. There's plenty of people on LinkedIn already sharing all of that. But what we wanted to evaluate was how are companies making sure that the data these AI systems and tools are using, they're doing it safely and appropriately. And so, Bill, we just kind of took a page out of your playbook, to be honest, sitting around the wonderful roundtables that you guys do all over the nation with CISOs, asking them kind of what's really going on in their world. And we thought we'd take an opportunity to conduct some research together. So thank you for participating.
Yeah, it was a great partnership. I mean, it was just a natural extension of the fact that you were participating in a bunch of our roundtables last year and already this year, speaking with our members about a multitude of topics. And then, the opportunity to have you talk to specific members and then survey a wider swath just to get their particular input on this research. So we were thrilled to partner.
And I know, Tim, I think this topic, I hope it's useful for other security leaders. Everyone's facing the pressure to deploy AI in their business in meaningful ways, and security leaders are no exception. But they're also sitting at that intersection of the business is moving fast, but we have to have the right ability to maybe help shape and make sure that we're doing it safely and appropriately. Talk to us a little bit about that pressure across the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can just sum it up with the AI is basically exponentially breaking enterprise trust infrastructures. What I mean by that is some of the, which I'm great that we're on this webinar together, because all of the things we're going to talk about are like fundamental challenges in control systems design for all enterprises. And so if we're talking data integrity or we're talking about managing your data well, they now play a much different and larger role than ever before. And it's because of that exponential scaling that's happening. We're seeing this. So my hope from this webinar is that as you're hearing us talk and have a dialogue, we go through the research, that other CISOs and other technology leaders can walk away with some very well synthesized information and, just take key takeaways for what's going to help them succeed.
That was a part of our goal. We wanted to have something that would be useful to the cybersecurity industry in general. But Landon, we took this idea of data trust, and I know that's I'll give you credit for this term. It's something I think you coined and we've kind of workshopped around. But why don't you explain a little bit about data trust to us and help set that table?
Yeah, for sure. I think the reason it was so prevalent in my head when we were kind of discussing topics that we wanted to bring to the industry that matched what we do as a company and our vision as a company is because it's the age-old challenge that we're trying to achieve, and it's more and more relevant every single day that AI kind of permeates into our ecosystem as organizations and as a world. And one of the things that we realized through just working in data security for the past 5 to 10 years, both together and as a company, was that the companies that are struggling to to innovate are the companies that tend to not be able to trust what they have, where it is, who's touching it, what's happening to that data, or even like how it's flowing between systems. And so this concept of being able to say, hey, if I trust my data, that means I can innovate, really stood out to us as a company. And when we looked at the use cases that people were saying, hey, Mind is a solution that's going to help us, it was because it gave them some semblance of trust that allowed them to innovate. And so this concept of data trust really became core to our hearts here at Mind. It's something we talk about a lot. It's something we built into our product, and you'll probably see a lot more of it on the product side as we continue going. And Samuel, I think this effort is a testament to kind of those core beliefs as a company here.
Yeah, and I think the definition that we used in this research project was that it's the degree of confidence you have that your systems, including AI systems, are using data safely and appropriately. Tim, is that something you guys talk about around security community?
Every day. I mean, we were just having a conversation this morning about, do we have real visibility and observability into how AI tools are being used across the enterprise? And then couple that with the demand to use them more and more in ways that I don't know that I really understand yet. I mean, I'm still getting my head wrapped around how I can use MCP to automate my own workflows. Now, unleash that to thousands of people that want to get the benefits of it, but may not understand truly how it's interacting with all the data behind the scenes. So, yeah, it's definitely top of mind.
And I'm sure, Bill, you guys are having these conversations in the roundtables you guys host.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the term trust and safe, right, and appropriate are terms that oftentimes CISOs haven't used. We have been head down for the last 10 years focusing on data security, right, for privacy purposes. And now all of a sudden we're using these terms about appropriate use of data, safe use of data, the trust in your whole data, all the data you have. It's stretching the CISO's role. And I think for the better, to be personally honest with you. I just think our members have gotten too narrowly focused on one of the three legs of the confidentiality, integrity, availability legs of that stool. And I think we're actually creating a four-legged stool now, adding this trust factor, where trust is maybe all three of those things wrapped up. So yes, we talk about this all the time, and it pushes the limits of the CISO.
And I think that's obviously your members are rallying to this challenge. I know just hearing them in those conversations of, we've got to deal with this. We got to deal with this well. So guys, let's take a few minutes. I'm going to start walking through some of the findings we have in this survey. The survey is now currently available. You can download a copy for yourself, and we'd love to just hope it's useful to you. So feel free to get your own copy as well. But let's start looking at some of the key findings that we found in this project that we've done together. And I'm just really curious to your thoughts to kind of get what you guys are thinking about all of this here. But let's dive into this. So the way that we did this survey was, I think, pretty elegant. We working with the CISO Executive Network, and you guys have a couple thousand members all over the United States. And we did two parts to the survey. The first one was we put together a quantitative, kind of a 3-question virtual survey. And it asked, we had a couple hundred respondents to that. And then we also set together a 20 interviews with active cybersecurity leaders, directly asking them questions related to what they have going on in their organization, how they're measuring success, and the things that they're doing, and looking at kind of as some minimum viable security for that. So we're going to walk through this a little bit together. The first one here is from the quantitative survey, and it was what AI presence, what are you guys doing with AI across your organization? And we wanted to be clear as well, this is what the business is pushing and doing to improve whatever function they're trying to improve, not just necessarily the cybersecurity tools that many defenders are also looking at that have AI embedded in them or used in some ways. But how is the business using AI? And Tim, 90% of organizations say that they're using some enterprise Gen AI tool, whether it's Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, Claude, something like that. 90% are using some form of enterprise Gen AI. Does that seem high, low? What are your thoughts?
I think that's at least for me, it's spot on. We have an initiative internally we call Customer Zero, which is we want to actually make sure that we're addressing AI governance and data security appropriately from the get-go, and we're using ourselves to do that. And I'm seeing this. I'm seeing that we've passed observability. Of course, it's like that's table stakes, making problems observable or table stakes. And now we're into, well, like how can we manage our way through the tools that everyone now wants to be able to have access to and utilize to do better work or improve their workflows. And so, yeah, the 90% is sure resonating with me. And it seems like it's resonating with many of the other CISOs in the network.
I'll tell you that we had a member in our breakfast out at RSA this past week who said a commandment on high from his company: every single employee will have at least 5 agents, AI agents working on behalf of them. It's mandated. You must have agents working for you. So, and of course, using their enterprise AI that they've selected. When you get those kind of mandates, you understand why it's 90%.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think too, we see obviously, an approved Gen AI tool. They're saying we're okay if you use this tool. It's safer. Or other known third-party AI agents. Obviously some of the big platforms that are trying to rapidly deploy agents, or even Claude agents running locally on your endpoint. And then some custom agentic AI workflows. And I mean, Landon, it seems like the vast majority of companies are deploying or doing something. And I'm sure you're talking with those clients every day.
Yeah, it's true, Sam. I think it's one of the areas that we talk about a lot with our clients, and especially prospective clients as well. Is I think the research kind of is in line with what we hear in the field, that there is a massive push for innovation, both for competitive, for efficiency, and even for some ways, safety concerns for using just enterprise Gen AI. But there are companies that know that approved Gen AI is out there. They know that third-party Gen AI is out there. They know that there's custom agentic work being done. I think the bigger question that a lot of these CISOs have for us is like, can we prove what's going on with them? What are they being used for? We know they're there. We're kind of okay that they're there because we want our people to be self-driven leaders of their own and innovate where they can. But there's not really a good way for them today to understand, how is this actually being used. And I think that's the big question that we're trying to solve for our customers as well.
And then the juxtaposition to this is the second question here, is that their degree of confidence in the data security controls that they have for these AI tools. What are they using to help make sure that the AI are using data safely and appropriately? And combining the bottom two responses, most CISOs, 2/3 of respondents were not or somewhat confident in their data security controls that they have at their disposal. What do you guys make of all that?
Yeah, I think the way that we were talking about this a bit was it's not that controls don't exist that can be useful to help people with generative AI or agentic AI solutions or workflows. It's are we in a place where we can operate them very, very well, or do we understand how they operate? And you just look at foundational things like sensitivity labels, device enrollment, in the Microsoft 365 ecosystems, just very basic things that, if in place, will help you secure Microsoft Copilot in a better way. And, I think it would be probably a bit foolish to think that all enterprises have their hands or arms wrapped around this problem space. And so I personally believe there's lots of systems and tools that can help you protect your organization. It's, are you familiar with how they work? Some of them are more advanced than others. And can they be used in a way that operates well for your organization? So this resonates with me, the spectrum of like, I'm not sure I have confidence in the controls.
Hey, and Tim, a follow-up question for you from your perspective is, one of the things that we talk about a lot when it comes to just data security controls, whether it's AI or not, is it's all foundational, right? I remember when kind of the first Copilot, the first ChatGPTs were coming out just a few years ago, the crux of using them safely was really like web security, right? It was really good foundational things back in the day. Yeah, I wonder from your perspective, how many organizations do you see that are saying, hey, we're not not confident or we're somewhat confident are struggling still with the foundations rather than, trying to address it as a new problem.
I can't speak for like what's factually happening at organizations. I can tell you there's a reason why we said that we want to be customer zero, and that's so that we can work through these problems. And what I'm seeing is that the fundamentals, you need to get them right. Like you need to have some opinion on what sensitivity labeling and handling looks like. You need to have what I call paved paths for people. So it's one thing to adopt AI technologies and kind of have a free for all. It's another thing to say, well, here's kind of like here's the path that we want you to be on with the tools. Here's how we think you should be handling data. Here's what you think you should think about open source software that's being used in and creating these systems and guiding people on to what are the paid paths that are available to so they know directionally where to go. I'm not a very big fan of like just no, shut it down. I think that's probably the wrong position to take strategically with your company, especially as Bill was saying, top down, the demands are very high.
Right. Yeah, and Landon, I'll tell you a quick story is when ChatGPT first hit the scene, and of course that was the first sort of commercially available AI, Gen AI, our advisory council members, Tim's a member of our advisory council, very quickly, within a day, started emailing us, hey, can we all get together as an advisory council? What are we all doing about this? Well, we got everybody on a call over the lunch hour, and day one, it was shut that crap down, shut it down, block that thing, we do not know what that is. Day two, okay, that's not a good idea. The CEO said, do not do that. We want to encourage everybody. We're going to hand everybody a pair of scissors and send them out to the playground. So now let's start breaking the tips off all the scissors. So it evolved very quickly. In less than a month, people like Tim went from block to guardrails to, hey, just a quick reminder, this is just like any other SaaS. You can't hand our sensitive data to any third party. This is just a third party, right? And of course, now the evolution's much broader than that. But it is interesting how quickly we went from, wow, block it, to guardrails, to, well, we have to allow it. And Tim, you said something interesting. You said, we're way past observability at this point. Now I think we need real enforcement, right? Guardrails and enforcement. So it's interesting to see how that evolved so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I was part of some of the CISO, like as you mentioned, CISO communities in New York City, and one of the first reaction was, acceptable use and like let's stop and like lots and lots of friction. And I was actually more on the side of like early adoption, like, no, actually, you need to use these tools every day, figure out how they work, figure out what's going on with the data inside of them, and use that as a learning to be able to help you provide guidance and paths for people for what does good look like, right?
Right.
And
Good point.
so it evolved very quickly, as you mentioned, Bill. It went from a little bit of a FUD straight into we better start working.
I agree.
But I think it's fascinating too, because, AI systems and tools, they don't just work in a vacuum. They need to be connected to something. They need something to feed it to work off of. And that thing that they're being fed with is your organization's data or some type of information that they're then going to work with or work on in order to produce something valuable. And so at its core, you're right, it is a fundamental conversation. And so I'm just curious, and Bill, from your perspective, a third of CISOs say they are reasonably confident in their data security controls. Now, I know typically security leaders are maybe a more pessimistic group. Maybe there could be something out there that will really hurt me or our organization. So maybe they're a little underreporting there, but only a third have a reasonable level of confidence in their ability to enforce controls on the data access for these AI systems and tools.
Well, something you learned when you conducted this survey for this research report is our members, especially at our roundtables, are very honest. Landon, both you and Sam have been to roundtables, and you see we play Vegas roles. Hey, what's said in here stays in here. And even though here we are revealing information to the general public, I think a lot of our members tend to be very honest about where they stand. In our roundtables, they roll up their sleeves, they cry on each other's shoulders and say, hey, I'm not overly confident that we know what we're doing here. And of course, data security has been an area where We've tried so many approaches for so long. DLP, when it first came out, very exciting, and then very quickly, wow, that's hard. I've coined this phrase that people laugh at, but it's true. DLW, right? Data loss watching. We spend a lot of money on software to tell us data's going out the door. God forbid we turn it on and block something because, business stopped, and then we get yelled at. So, we'll just keep renewing this software for data loss watching. So again,
Right.
I think our members are brutally honest, which is why I think we saw 34% saying, I'm a little bit more than the other guys, but not a whole lot more confident.
Yeah, and some of that stuff is like, do you have some foundational program related discipline? Like, do you have good control, observability? Are you resilient to problems? Are you able to, and especially with AI, are you able to be fine-grained in the way that you respond to those problems? I've frequently found, like, if you kind of treat all businesses equal in your approach, you're going to find yourself very quickly in a position where you're not adapting your own strategy or designs around what the business actually really needs. And that's going to be different from business to business. A manufacturing supply chain is going to be different than a financial services institution. And so adaptability and getting some good fine-grained assessments going can help you. And like, how do you actually want to take action on something?
Yeah. So the third point that we brought up was around what are they currently struggling with, their biggest struggles for AI security. On average in this research project, most CISOs selected like 3.5 out of the 6 options. So the majority of CISOs were selecting 3+ of these as options, which I found was really interesting because there's a wide swath there. But most interesting to me, and I'm curious your thoughts here, is it looks like the top 4 are all about either enforcing controls or policies or understanding data access. Most organizations would have some type of governance policies that say you cannot load AWS credentials into ChatGPT. That would probably be a reasonable governance policy. The enforcement of it is where they're maybe running into some issues and challenges. But the juxtaposition of how low on the totem pole here discovery is, like you said, we've moved past observability, Tim, and I think that's a really interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe 2025 was around making things observable and so that they could be understandable. And my experience with putting control systems friction on other systems is always that it doesn't always end up being as a deterministic outcome as you'd like it. Experimenting with guardrail policies, for example, on AI prompts. It sounds great when you look at materials that are designed to be architected well, and then you put it in practice and developers begin to inject it into their workflows and things become brittle or they become fragile. And I think that's the enforcing policies on generative AI tools. That's why you see like a very large percentage there. It's because even if you're experimenting with some of those guardrails that are already available, just like a lot of other security controls, if you don't really configure them well and have good insight and observability into how they're working, the likelihood is high that you're going to end up making the experience of the tools be a whole nother realm of like bad. And so, part of this is really about, are we configured well? How long do we want to have something be in observation period? When do you start tightening the friction a little bit? And when can you loosen it? Because as you probably know, like there's always sorry, we tightened the screws a little bit too tight. Now we're going to need to loosen them up again. And so I think that's this is my opinion, it's representing that very large percentage on the top, which is actually enforcing policy is hard work.
Yep. It involves people, and that's the
It
problem.
involves a lot of people to be able to understand, test, keep iterating through those tests, and getting it right is important.
I think there's this sub layer that feeds into every single one of these top four challenges here. We talk about understanding what data we are starting to understanding what data AI agents can access and what data is allowed in Gen AI, and enforcing policies in both regard. It screams to me this foundational challenge we've had in data security for a long time, which is really easy to stop all data from going to A to B, right? But as you said, Tim, like this is where we're sort of tightening the noose a little bit. The belt's a little too tight. We can't do this everywhere. There's this fundamental concept of we need to be able to stop the wrong data from going to A to B. And I think for decades as a DLP industry, DLP market, we've been able to get away with just stopping data from going to A to B, whether that's by mechanism or by transfer type, but we've just been able to stop it. And now we have information tools that only operate well when they're fed the right information. And the challenge now becomes, how do we stop feeding it the wrong information? And so now we're back to the core of this problem, which is, hey, how do we stop the wrong data from going to A to B? And I think that lack of confidence is really, from what I can tell in the conversations that I've had, what these CISOs are really struggling with. Tim, would you agree in that perspective?
Data lineage keeps coming up in a lot of my conversations. Like, can you prove where the data came from and how you derived a decision?
Wow.
When building systems or even operating in systems that have AI capabilities built into them. It's the conversations have been very much around how do you prove that you came to this result, which requires you to kind of have a fine-grained tracing. And if you look at fine-grained tracing capabilities, it's an engineering capacity of being able to get that traceability. So enforcing policies based on tracing and it's very similar to like having a microservices, a Kubernetes microservices sidecar container that's making policy decisions on runtime inside of the cluster, right? This is very, very similar to the type of thinking that's required in generative AI and reasoning through data lineage.
Landon, you said something that makes me think, why is this so different? If this is, we've been great at stopping data from going from A to B. Here's a SaaS provider, can't go there. We can't send this kind of data there. We've been pretty good about that. We figured out the rules and ways and mechanisms and tools to stop that. Why is AI so different? And why is it stretching the CISO when we start using terms like safety, right, inappropriateness of data? And I wonder it's partly, well, once the data is gone, it becomes part of the fabric of the LLM. Boy, we'll never get those records back when we break up with them, right? That's never coming back. Is there something more, I wonder?
Yeah, I think it's that, but it's also everything that we do now and every product and every service and the services we're building, services we're competing against our competitors with, everything is contextual now, right? It all is deterministic or determined by what's the content or context or those things combined, the content plus the context of the data that I'm using, right? So a good example is today we had conversations around, hey, our customers want the ability to understand the context of the document on top of and in addition to the content inside the document, because I can no longer just make decisions for data exfiltration on the content of the document or the context of the document. I need both of these things combined, and I need to evaluate them both, like Tim said, at runtime, at the time of event, right? Not before, not after, but during, and make that decision at that time. And so this is, again, I think the answer, Bill, is when we're dealing with these systems and everything is so interconnected, context is king, which is a phrase we hear a lot, but it's context plus content is king. And that's the way that really, in my opinion, tools should be relieving that mental toil on our workforce and really enabling them to operate safely.
Right. We'll never do this in runtime without technology. Yeah.
No, the runtime is very difficult. I mean, I'm already seeing that. And you know what we can also do that's beneficial. I mean, I don't want to be just saying, hey, there's a lot of complication. There are some simple approaches that you can use that help you reason about systems, whether it's an AI system or not. And this goes back to simple first principles of like crown jewel analysis, and what's the most sensitive thing that I'm worried about, and it could be a Swift system, or it could be some intellectual property related to, again, manufacturing or whatever. And you may want to tier that. And so, you may have a general use of AI tools and systems that could be okay in experimentation, but you might want it far away from wherever your intellectual property is so that you can allow safe experimentation until you know that you're ready to actually turn it on in more sensitive workloads. And so there are still fundamental first principles that you can go on to help guide what your strategy is for how you're going to put controls in place. So it's not all like it's not all challenge. There are simple first principles that you could use, like the basic hygiene principles, separation of concerns. Are we allowing safe experimentation in the right places, and are we making sure that it's away from where we might do harm on systems, whether through resiliency or exposure?
Well, I think that's something that I heard a lot of CISOs say when I was talking with them in this research process was the idea that security by obscurity is now completely gone. The moment we've connected some AI system or tool into our environment, in the past with the SaaS application, there was a bit more friction. It wasn't necessarily, open to everything within an AI system or tool. Now it's give access to whether it's through MCP or RAG or whatever process you're using, and everything is connected. When I work in Claude and it's like, I need access to this, always allow, right? Always allow,
Right.
always allow. And now all of this information, yes, it's an enterprise licensed Claude instance. We have controls on different things, and it's a safe environment to do that. But that security by obscurity is no longer a thing anymore. And I think that's where, so some CISOs would say, this is really a data discovery and classification issue that we've been kind of kicking the can down the road for many, many years. And now all of a sudden, the exposure is just exponentially bigger, as you said at the start, Tim.
Yeah, the enterprise trust becomes an exponential problem, and it's because of that the data fabric, and it forces you to work through it, in order to make systems function properly.
Okay, so let's drive into this last part here. We went through in this report, we kind of have 7 key insights. I'm just going to read a little top of this. Again, if you want a copy of this report, it is now publicly accessible. Happy to get this in your hands, so hopefully it can be useful to you. And then I want to finish up our conversation today is there were some kind of key themes around minimum viable security that CISOs were talking about us. These are some things we want to make sure are in place before we're really willing to give a green light or say, yes, absolutely, let's run really fast here. So we'll go through this really quick, and then we'll look at some of those minimum viable security criterion that CISOs were wanting to have. And I'm curious your thoughts on it, to be honest with you. But ultimately, it really comes down to this statement in the second paragraph on this page here is the way that we found across this research project is that organizations cannot enforce policies on data they haven't classified being accessed by AI systems and tools their frameworks were never built to govern. As a result, most are already experiencing AI project failure or slowdown, and CISOs are struggling to communicate the exposure risk to a business committed to moving fast. The reality is that AI is a stress test of existing security fundamentals. Some may suffer catastrophic data loss events, while those who have good security habits will thrive in the AI era. I mean, candidly, this sounds an awful lot like what you guys have been talking about so far today.
Bill, like if you get the foundation of a house right, likelihood is high that you're going to be able to build more things on top of it. But if you are, let me give you in a different lens. Like if you're coming into the as a CISO, a first-time CISO into a program for the first time, and no one's actually worked through setting up some of those fundamentals or the first principles well, then the likelihood is higher that you're going to have a more difficult time adopting tools that all of a sudden have accessibility to data in ways that you may not quite understand. And so it's my opinion if an enterprise and technology leaders, CTOs, CIOs, CISOs, done the work that allows them to think about workloads and think about governance and think about first principles of where the data is and a little bit of separation of concerns, then the likelihood's higher that you're going to be successful and adopting AI workflows. And
Yep.
so that's kind of my like tale of two sides of like some firms may actually be set up adequately to make use of the technologies that are available.
Yeah, and I think the members in our network who will be most successful at helping their companies safely use AI are the ones who the CISO becomes the center of excellence for AI. The CISO organization understands it and dives into it and gets all the training and plays with it every single day and goes, okay, now I understand how the business is going to use it. Tim, much like you said, you're customer zero, right? You need your own
Yeah, of
dog
course.
food. The CISO organization should become the center of excellence for AI usage, which makes the CISO almost like a CTO in a way. And I'm okay with that. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and it builds on the resiliency mindset that is naturally part of a CISO's role and responsibility. And we think very carefully about how do I recover from events? We know we're going to have events. How am I going to recover quickly from events? And so um, we mentioned before, saying no is not really the option. Understanding how they work, applying them, creating paid paths for people for adopting the tools in what I call sane ways, I think is important. And you get that through experimentation and experiential learning.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Let me review these kind of the key themes that we observed
Yeah.
in the interview process here, and just get your general comments here, and then we'll dive into some minimum viable security controls. So the first observation is that there is indeed a wide gap between visibility of AI and enforcement. The second one is around data fundamentals are lacking and impede AI initiatives.
Mhm.
And the third one, this from the Department of Redundancy or the Department of No Duh, is AI does not behave like a human all the time.
Well, even the
And
agents, right, who are working on behalf of a human, not like a human.
yeah, I try and convince my boss that. No, I'm just kidding. AI initiatives are already failing due to a lack of data trust,
Mhm.
and that CISOs want early AI project involvement. And then AI is a stress test of security fundamentals. It's the current most innovative and disruptive thing facing our organizations today. And then finally, the last piece was it seemed to be a high agreement here was that high data trust is a competitive accelerant for organizations. Those that have a good level of data trust will be able to move faster in their AI experimentation and also deployment of these initiatives.
Mm.
Just some of your thoughts about all this.
Well, even if like high data trust, like even if you're thinking about it in the right ways, like different tiering of data or simplifying just simple A and B, like A over there is where you can have free reign on all of the tools, and B is kind of like the no touch zone while you work your way through what does high trust data look like. I mean, I think that's a progressive way of looking at things. There's a ThoughtWorks article that I really like talking about how AI is a mirror. It's a mirror of how you work. It's a mirror of your data, and if it's a mirror of your organization. And if you have an organization that's not set up in the right ways with the right processes, it's going to mirror that and amplify that. And if you have gone through some of the work of having to go through reconciling um, um, data sources and where your APIs are, then the likelihood is the mirror amplification effect is going to work for you. And so I find that analogy of like AI being an amplification mirror very helpful when speaking to people about adoption, for sure.
And I think you said something I thought very valuable there, Sam, was when you said, it can become an accelerant, but only if we have our data trust models in place. I mean, companies are going to run quickly with those scissors in their hand, and
Yeah.
we're going to try to protect them along the way. But I think it has amplified for us that we never really got our data properly set up. We even if it's just multiple cases of data, right? Just unclean data across the network. All these things come to, you find these when you kick over the rocks of data just for the purpose of securing it. Now, all of a sudden, we're trying to do all these other things to create trust. So I just think it does amplify the fact that we never got our data classification correct from the start. And any technology, any solutions that are going to help with that are going to rise to the top very quickly, yours being an example.
It's kind of you to say it. I think that's the part of this is that, getting data in a secure, stable place so it can be safely and appropriately used by AI systems. I think I wouldn't say it's job one, but it's certainly top 5, maybe. I mean, that would probably be something reasonable to say.
Well, I'll tell you this. We had roughly 60 members that we engaged with out at RSA last week coming to our breakfast roundtables there. And we always ask them at every one of our conference adjacent roundtables is, what's your 12 to 18 month outlook? What are you doing? What are your big projects? And then what technology are you looking at while you're here at the conference? And they were surprisingly misaligned. We thought that every 12 to 18 month project would result in, hey, I'm looking for a tech to solve that. The projects were kind of wide ranging, although focusing a lot on data and identity. But in terms of tech that they're looking at, almost every single one, AI governance. I need some AI governance. That's what everybody said they're looking for.
Yeah, that's right. That's resonating with me as well.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go down to this last part here at the very end, which is around our ideas on minimum viable security for these AI tools. Let's go through this here real quick. I'm curious what you guys think of these. Is that realistically, 6 different things that they wanted to understand. First, is it an enterprise deployment? Do we have an actual enterprise license? Have they gone through our vendor management process? What are we doing with all of that? And as part of that process, how well do we understand and have we defined how they are using our data? Are they storing it? Are they retaining it? What are they doing with it? What's the processing look like of it? The retention and hosting transparency. Is this a running on a machine in your closed environment? Is it their model? Is it multi? Is it public? What are they doing as far as retention and hosting? And then they want to make sure they integrate with the identity so that those sub agents that are running on an endpoint or the people who are accessing this AI tool, we have a higher degree of confidence in who they are. Obviously, SSO, any kind of 2FA or things like that you would do for any other enterprise app. And then scoping the data access, being clear about what data can or cannot this AI system or tool have access to and use. Your internal HR chatbot should probably never have customer records available to it. Being able to define those things and have that written down clearly. And then finally, this was actually a surprise to me, is the ability to define KPIs that the business cares about.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious your thoughts on just these as minimum viable security requirements. Anything you would add or subtract or comment on?
I'm going to jump in on something, just the last one, and defined business KPIs, whether it's specifically security and safety related or just the usage of AI. One of our members at an RSA breakfast said she asks every time a business unit comes before the team that decides whether projects are going to move forward, what are your measurements of success for using this AI? Are you just fooling around with it? Which is fine if you're doing that, but that's probably done over in the playground. But if you're pushing forward a project, what is success? What will we get out of the use of this AI? And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think that's, well, again, partly the role of the CISO. It's going to be a broader group of people making those decisions.
Yeah, and there are certain, if I'm hearing you correctly, like you're saying, hey, there may be a separation of concerns between how are you applying AI and what's the use case? In other words, what's the outcome you're looking to get
Right.
by applying it? And then there's this, there's another aspect to that, which is there are certain areas of a business that may be fine with a large percentage margin of error in decision making. And then there may be other parts of a business that really can't have a large percentage of a margin of error. And if you unwind a margin of error, let's say it's a 10% margin of error on AI, which is a very non-deterministic system, are you okay with the outcomes that, in other words, you can work on that outcome-based thinking, Bill, a little bit of like, you're going to have 10% margin of error in this, likely related to decisions that are coming off of a very deterministic system. Are you okay with that project being the thing you want to experience that with?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Or should we be asking questions? I really like 6 as being the bottom line for things, because we are here. The reason why we are in the roles as leaders that we're in is because we're helping guide and provide counsel to other leaders in the organization that are trying to get answers on, well, how should I do this? And so if you can paint the picture of it being a mirror, and you can also set up like, there's this percentage margin of error that you may be okay to accept. Is that the project you really want to go forward with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Versus maybe you have a different project that is a, production class system, and exposing APIs in ways that you may not have exposed them before may not be acceptable right now. You need to do a stepping stone approach before you go to that.
Yeah. Interesting.
And behind all that is, do you understand what's being accessed?
Yeah.
Do you understand the data lineage? Do you know where the data is coming from? Like, are you okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're part of that board now that have to ask those hard questions. And again, some of them, Sam, I don't think are always security or privacy related. I think we start asking questions like, what if, is this software going to make determination about who gets loans and who doesn't get loans? Well, we should be concerned about that, because there are things outside of security. Bring in somebody else, from the business to make that decision. Something else I think that number 4 there, the identity integration. Members are talking about this a lot, is the relationship between identity and data. Who is using data? And that's going to get harder when you have lots and lots of agents accessing data on somebody's behalf.
Right.
I don't know how we're going to solve that problem. Hopefully you guys are trying to solve that problem.
Yeah, it's something we're thinking about daily here, obviously here at Mind, and integrating with identity stores and understanding the who about that kind of stuff. One of the things I thought was interesting is that whole issue of KPIs is treat whatever AI initiative, treat it like an enterprise application. Be able to go through and look at it and say, who is the application owner? Like, you probably don't own the core business applications in your organization, nor should you. Cybersecurity applications, you're the executive sponsor of, but who's the business unit leader that's going to be able to own this application as a whole to be able to drive towards its goals and accomplish it? And I think understanding that, and then what do we need it to do? What are the measurements we need to put in place for it to be successful? Because if you know what successful is supposed to look like, you're going to be able to course correct pretty early on if it is not achieving those goals, or adjust parameters or guardrails or systems or whatever it needs to be done. And I think that was something, CISOs in the research felt like they weren't getting a lot of clarity from the business on what the KPIs were. So it made it a little bit harder for them to put in the right structures or guardrails in place for the system there.
What are some of the other major business-oriented feedback that you received when doing the study that it kind of resonated with you, Sam?
Yeah, I think that it's what I took away from a lot of it in the conversations was CISOs want to go fast with AI. They absolutely do. Their officers in their organization, they're motivated for their business to succeed, and all of those are very, very true. But they speak the language of risk and exposure. That's their lingua franca that they speak all day, every day. They understand and they think deeply about these things. And their peers across the business don't necessarily have that same perspective. And so they really sit at the crux of this intersection between, yes, we want to go fast at the business because AI is going to help us, all sorts of competitive advantage benefits. We can talk about that all day long. However, if we get certain things wrong and all of a sudden our core IP is now publicly available within a ChatGPT model for every single person on planet Earth, that could be a significant business impact to our organization. And having that conversation, that was where a lot of CISOs were really working hard with their peers of being able to explain that in a way that they understand, that the business understands, because that's the language of risk and exposure that they speak every day. They don't want the business to fail or have significant issues, and they also want to go fast. And so they're trying to navigate that course between those two realities and make sure neither of them happen in a bad way.
Yeah. I think it's honest assessment. I think that's what we hear too, is all of our members are pro-business. I mean, that's how they
Yeah.
get their budget. That's their whole purpose in being is, I got to make the company run fast. Tim subscribes to that. And so they're all on board with AI. And I think the ones who are, again, being most successful are ones like Tim, who are embracing AI for their own use and understanding it fully. And then they can sit alongside the business and go, well, we use it in security. And here's the things we've learned along the way.
I had a wonderful conversation with some of our staff members this morning. And one of the things that resonated with me was the comment that, I'm very grateful that we were able to adopt some AI tools, even in experimentation, because I'm starting to see ideas on how I might be able to maybe get myself out of some of the toil or the operational burdens we have. And so there is the promise of the tooling being able to work in our favor for sure. I'm seeing it in people that are using it and experimenting around the use of it, and in other leadership circles, the message is still the same. It's changing the way the enterprise trust fabric that existed a decade ago it's shattering that. AI is shattering the enterprise trust fabric. And so many companies have to adopt to what's going on with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think also too the almost universality of it's an executive, like a CEO driven mandate. Bill, you mentioned one of your members talking about the CEO is saying, I want everyone on our team, at this level of productivity with AI agents. And there were a couple of interviews where they were just starting that process. They'd had kind of fits and starts in their organization around that executive top-down mandate for their business. But the ones that were certainly moving the fastest had that top-level executive buy-in and push to say, we have to improve these things. Which I thought was interesting. I thought it would be a little bit more bottom up, to be honest. I thought it would be a little bit more, individual business lines or people experimenting, trying and finding good benefit and then sharing it widely. But no, this is definitely from the executive leadership down, pushing through the org.
And the ones that we're finding that are being more successful with that, Tim, you guys may have done this, is they also bring in coaches and say, look, we're not just throwing you at just go have some fun with AI. Again, here's some scissors, go run around. We're going to bring in an expert who coaches you on how to use AI correctly, right? What are the best ways to get the most productivity out of it, and picking an enterprise AI model. And I think that's key to success, is not just randomly throw it out to the world, see what you come up with, because I think that's going to result in a lot of data loss.
Yeah, keys to success, like setting up coaching, like you said, finding the right partner that has already done it a little bit and can come in and give some safe experimentation so people can adapt and learn how to use the tools. I think that's very helpful too. And those are a couple of ingredients for being successful with this for sure.
Yeah, well, hey, coming soon to a city near you at a CISO Executive Network roundtable, this conversation around data trust and AI success. And so, Bill, personal note of thanks, very grateful for your partnership in conducting this research. Tim, also, thank you for participating and sharing the insights that you have as a part of this project. And, again, hope it's useful to the industry as a whole as we all navigate the intersection of risk, AI, data, and everything else going on.
Thanks, Sam.
So,
Thank you.
So for Bill Sieglin, for Tim Kropp and Landon Brown, my name is Samuel Hill, and that's all for now.